Nurse Mara Linton stood beside Major Elias Reed's bed while Captain Owen Stowe opened the old black metal case and began taking the decorations out one by one. The military hospital hallway had gone so quiet that every clipped ribbon sounded like a small betrayal. Doctors, nurses, uniformed visitors, and recovering soldiers watched as Dr. Victor Harlan smirked and said, "A man who hasn't spoken in 6 years doesn't get to invent a war record." Mara's throat tightened, but she forced her hands to stay steady. "Please," she whispered, "don't remove them until you check the lining." Harlan laughed in front of everyone. "The nurse thinks velvet can testify." Then Major Reed, silent as stone for years, lifted his trembling hand from the blanket and saluted Mara. The room froze, and nobody understood why his eyes were fixed on the metal case. "Before we step deeper into this veteran ward, tell us where you're watching from, and leave your country in the comments. And if you believe in quiet courage, hidden heroes, hospital, justice, loyalty, sacrifice, and emotional reversals, subscribe to The Quiet Medic for more stories like this." The veteran ward at Fort Astor Military Hospital always felt colder on ceremony days. The floors were polished until the white lights doubled beneath people's shoes. Flags stood along the corridor. The brass plaques had been wiped clean. Even the air seemed ordered to stand at attention. Nurse Mara Linton had worked that ward for 4 years, long enough to know that cold was not always about temperature. Sometimes it came from the way important people entered a room and made the wounded feel like furniture. That morning, Dr. Victor Harlan walked in with his silver hair combed back, his white coat hanging like a banner of authority. Beside him came Captain Owen Stowe, young, stiff, and polished, carrying a clipboard against his chest. Behind them trailed a few uniformed visitors from the base command office, 2 hospital administrators, and several staff members who had been told to witness an integrity review. Mara already knew which bed they were coming for. Major Elias Reed lay in room 12, closest to the window. Though he never looked outside, he was 68, lean in the face, with a gray beard trimmed by habit rather than vanity. He had been a decorated field officer once, at least according to the medals displayed in the black case beside his bed. But he had not spoken a full sentence since the winter evacuation at Morrow Ridge 6 years earlier. Some staff called him the Silent Major. Mara never did. To her, he was Major Reed, not because of rank, because he seemed to be holding himself together by the last thread of discipline he had left. Every morning, before checking his blood pressure, Mara would say, "Good morning, Major, I'm here." His eyes would move to her, not always quickly, not always clearly, but they moved. When she adjusted his blanket, he watched her fingers as if recognizing an old procedure from another lifetime. And every morning, she made sure the metal case stayed within his sight. It was not flashy. The case had worn corners, a cracked hinge, and one brass latch that clicked unevenly. Inside, on dark blue velvet, rested several military decorations, campaign ribbons, and a small folded flag patch. There was also an empty oval in the velvet where something had once rested. The empty space bothered Mara in a way she could never explain. The first time she noticed it, she had felt a strange pressure behind her ribs. She had looked away quickly. Some memories did not need a name to hurt. Now Dr. Holland stopped at the foot of Major Reed's bed and glanced at the metal case like it offended him. "Captain Stowe," he said, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "Proceed." Mara stepped closer to the bed. "Proceed with what?" Harlan smiled without warmth. "Nurse Linton, this review does not concern you. It concerns my patient. It concerns property displayed under questionable circumstances." Captain Stowe avoided Mara's eyes. He opened his clipboard and read, "Pending verification of decorations associated with Major Elias Reed. Command has requested temporary removal from public display." "Temporary," Mara repeated. Harlan gave a soft laugh. That is the polite word. Major Reed's fingers tightened against the blanket. Mara saw it. No one else did. Major Reed becomes distressed when the cases move, she said. It's part of his orientation routine. His orientation routine, Harlan said, turning toward the visitors, has apparently included allowing unverified medals to sit in a federal medical facility for years. They were admitted with him, and no one checked. I checked his intake inventory. You checked what a nurse is qualified to check. Harlan's voice sharpened. Bandages, pill cups, temperature charts. Not valor. The words landed in the room like a slap. Mara felt every face turned toward her. Nurse Paige Kim, standing near the supply cart, lowered her eyes. A young horseman in the doorway shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Captain Stowe swallowed. Mara kept her face still. She had learned a long time ago that if tears came in front of men like Harlan, they became evidence against you. Sir, she said, the case has a damaged lining. There might be documentation tucked inside. I noticed. Harlan cut her off. You noticed velvet. A few people laughed, not loudly. That would have been too cruel, but softly enough to make the cruelty safe. Mara's ears burned. Captain Stowe reached for the metal case. Major Reed's breathing changed. Wait, Mara said. Harlan looked delighted. For what? A speech from him. The captain opened the case. The old hinge creaked. The sound made Major Reed's eyes widen. One by one, Stowe removed the medals from the velvet and placed them into evidence sleeves. The first ribbon slid free, then the second, then a round bronze decoration, then a silver-edged medal that had darkened with age. Major Reed's right hand trembled. Mara stepped beside him and quietly pressed her palm near his wrist, not restraining him, only anchoring him. I'm here, she murmured. Harlan heard her. How touching. The last medal came free with resistance. The velvet lifted slightly at one corner. Mara saw something underneath. Not paper exactly. A strip of faded cloth. Maybe a thread, a marking. Captain, Mara said, stronger now. Stop. The lining moved. Stowe paused. Harlan snapped. Continue. But she's right, Paige said quietly. Everyone looked at Paige. Harlan's face hardened. Nurse Kim, you might return to your station. Paige went pale. Captain Stowe took the last medal and placed it in a sleeve. The case looked suddenly empty, wounded in a way Mara could not explain. The blue velvet showed pale impressions where medals had rested for years. The empty oval seemed larger now, like an unanswered question. Harlan closed the evidence folder. There, he said. The ward is cleaner already. Something moved on the bed. Major Reed's hand lifted. At first, everyone thought he was reaching for the missing medals, but his fingers curled, straightened, and rose with painful control to his brow. Not toward Harlan, not toward Captain Stowe, toward Mara. The old soldier saluted the nurse they had just mocked. Every sound disappeared. Mara felt her breath catch. She had seen salutes before. Formal ones, careless ones, angry ones, farewell ones. But this was different. This was recognition pulled out of silence by humiliation. Major Reed's eyes shone, fixed on her face. Mara could not move. Dr. Harlan's smirk faded for half a second before he forced it back. Involuntary motor response, he said. But no one laughed this time. Captain Stowe stared at the empty case in his hands. Sir, he said slowly, there's something stitched under the velvet. Mara looked down. In the place where the last medal had been, a faded thread had risen through the lining. 2 letters, QMM, and beneath them, almost hidden by age, the number 17. Mara's knees nearly weakened. Because 6 years ago, on a mountain road no one in that hospital ever mentioned. Her call sign had been Quiet Medic 17. Dr. Harlan ordered the visitors out of room 12. With the stiff irritation of a man whose staged moment had gone off script. Major Reed is overstimulated, he announced. Clear the room. Nobody moved at first. They were still watching Elias Reed's hand. It remained in salute, shaking but deliberate, aimed at Mara as though the entire hospital had narrowed to her face. The gesture hurt more than the laughter had. Laughter was easy to survive. She had survived plenty of it. But recognition was dangerous. Recognition opened doors she had spent years holding shut with both hands. Major, she whispered. You can rest. His fingers trembled once more before falling back onto the blanket. The spell broke. Captain Stowe closed the metal case, but he did not carry it away as confidently as before. His eyes kept dropping to the lifted velvet seam. Harlan noticed. Captain, evidence bag. Yes, sir. The entire case, Harlan said. Not just the decorations. Mara turned. You said the decorations were under review, not the case? And now the case appears to contain unauthorized markings. Unauthorized by whom? Harlan stepped close enough that she could smell the sharp mint on his breath. Careful, Nurse Linton. There it was. The warning behind the title. Nurse, not veteran, not witness, not anyone with a memory worth respecting. Just nurse. Mara lowered her voice. That case calms him. You take it away tonight, he might decline. Are you making a medical prediction or an emotional demand? I am advocating for my patient. You are attaching yourself to a delusion. Mara looked toward Major Reed. His eyes had closed, but one hand still searched the blanket as if expecting the weight of something that had been stolen. She wanted to say, he knows me, but that would open everything. So she said nothing. Harlan addressed the room. Captain Stowe will secure the items in administration until verification is complete. Nurse Linton will chart the patient's agitation as non-specific and unrelated to command review. Mara lifted her chin. I will chart what happened. Harlan's smile returned. Of course you will. In language appropriate to your scope. The visitors filed out slowly, whispering. The young horseman looked back once at Mara. Paige stayed near the door until Harlan's footsteps faded down the hall. Then she rushed in. Mara, she said softly. What was that? Mara checked Major Reed's pulse because she needed something ordinary under her fingers. He saluted. He saluted you. He was distressed. Mara did not answer. Paige had worked beside her for 3 years. She knew Mara's habits, knew she took the night shifts nobody wanted, knew she changed dressings with a gentleness that made even angry patients go quiet, knew she never attended military ceremonies, never joined staff parties on Memorial Day, and always left the room when old deployment footage played on the war television. But Paige did not know about Mara Ridge. Nobody did. At least Mara had believed nobody did. Major Reed's eyelids fluttered. Mara leaned close. Major, can you hear me? His lips moved, but no sound came. It's all right, she said. Don't force it. His fingers pressed weakly against the blanket. Tap, then a pause. Tap. Mara froze. Paige noticed. What? Nothing. But it was not nothing. 3 taps had been the old signal when radios fail. Alive. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap. Alive. Mara felt the room tilt backward into memory. White breath in frozen air. A failing radio. Men calling through static. Her own voice whispering. Hold the light. I'm coming. She stepped away from the bed too quickly. Paige caught her arm. You're pale. I need to check his chart. You've checked his chart 100 times. Not all of it. The paper records room sat behind administration, past a locked door that smelled of dust, toner, and old decisions. Fort Astor had digital systems, but older military transfers still carried physical jackets. especially when parts of the record were sealed. Mara signed the log and requested Major Reed's archive file. The clerk frowned. Harlan already pulled it? When? 20 minutes ago. Mara looked down the hall. Administration, of course. She turned to leave, but the clerk said, wait, there's a duplicate intake folder. Mara took it. Inside were basic forms. Transfer date, medication list, next of kin unavailable, former rank, unit assignments. Most of it she had seen before. But this time, with QM17 burning in her mind, one line caught her. Operational injury connected to Morrow Ridge evacuation. Morrow Ridge? The name looked smaller on paper than it felt inside her. Mara pressed her thumb against the edge of the file. 6 years ago, she had worn a different uniform under a different sky. Sergeant Mara Linton, flight train field medic attached to rotating evacuation teams. Call sign Quiet Medic 17, because she was known for staying calm over radio, even when everyone else shouted. At Morrow Ridge, calm had not been enough. The convoy had been pinned by weather, confusion, and wrong coordinates. Mara had warned command that the safest route was not the marked road. She had repeated it until her throat hurt. Someone higher up overrode her. The mission fractured into panic. She remembered faces lit by emergency lamps, hands reaching, voices fading into storm and static. She remembered a major she never met clearly, shouting that he would hold the line until the medic cleared the wounded. She remembered being pulled into an evacuation helicopter with someone else's blood on her sleeves, though she had never allowed herself to picture whose. Afterward, a review board asked questions that sounded like accusations. A report said communications were unclear. Her warning was called unverified. Her actions were reduced to emotional improvisation under stress. She left active service within the year. She became a hospital nurse because wounds still needed hands even when records lied. Now Major Elias Reed's file contained the name of the place where her life had split in two. Mara turned the page. Several sections were blacked out. But at the bottom of one transfer note, a handwritten line had been missed. Patient becomes calm when metal case remains visible. Repeats attempts to vocalize. Weep chuta m. Mara stared. A door opened behind her. Captain Stowe stepped into the records corridor, carrying the black metal case under one arm. They both stopped. His face tightened. Nurse Linton, Captain, you're not supposed to be in this file. He made sure. I'm on his care, Chimichi. He looked at the folder in her hand, then at her face. For the first time that morning, he seemed less certain of himself. What does QM mean? He asked. Mara's grip tightened. Before she could answer, Dr. Holland's voice came from behind him. It means, Holland said, that Nurse Linton is exactly where she should not be. He walked forward and removed the folder from Mara's hands. Then he looked at Captain Stowe. Secure the case by midnight, he said, and this time don't let the nurse near it. Captain Stowe hesitated. That hesitation was small, but Mara saw it, and Dr. Holland saw it too. By evening, the metal case had become a rumor. Nothing moved faster through a military hospital than the possibility that someone's honor had been false or stolen. In the cafeteria, staff lowered their voices when Mara entered. In the nurses' station, two residents stopped talking mid-sentence. A uniformed visitor outside room 9 glanced at her badge and then away, as though her name might explain what had happened. Mara told herself she did not care. Then she dropped a syringe cap because her hands were shaking. Paige picked it up before it rolled under the cabinet. Go breathe, Paige said. I'm fine. You're standing like you're waiting for incoming fire. Mara looked at her. Paige's expression softened. Sorry, no, Mara said. You're not wrong. They stood in silence beneath the hum of fluorescent lights. From room 12 came a faint sound. Both nurses turned. Major Reed had knocked the plastic water cup from his bedside tray. It lay on the floor, rolling slowly until it touched the wall. Mara hurried in. I'm here, Major. His eyes were open and fixed on the empty space where the metal case had always sat. "It's being held temporarily," she said, hating the words as she said them. His breathing tightened. She lowered the side rail and leaned closer. "Look at me. Not the shelf. Me." His gaze shifted with difficulty. "That's it," she said. "You're safe in this room." His hand moved. Tap, tap, pause, tap, alive. Mara closed her eyes for 1 second. Paige, standing behind her, whispered, "That means something, doesn't it?" Mara nodded once. "What?" "A field signal. You know it." "Yes." How? Mara opened her eyes. "Because I used it." Paige waited. Mara did not continue. Major Reed's fingers moved again, weaker this time. Tap, tap. Then his index finger dragged across the blanket as if drawing a line. Mara watched. He drew a rectangle. "The case?" she asked. His eyes sharpened. "The metal case?" His fingers pressed down. "Yes." Mara looked toward the hall. "Paige, check where they logged it." "I can't access administration evidence." "Then check supply transfer." "Harlan likes paperwork more than people. He'll leave a trail." Paige's mouth tightened. "And if he catches me, he'll say something cruel. He always does. But he won't be able to say you were wrong if we find something." Paige left. Mara stayed with Major Reed. She adjusted his pillow, checked his oxygen, and kept her voice low. "The ordinary tasks, though, the ordinary tasks steadied them both. But inside, the past kept opening. Quiet. Medic 17. She had not heard the call sign spoken aloud in years. After the review board, she stopped using anything that connected her to service. The uniform went into a storage box. The commendation letters, few and vague, stayed unopened. She let people believe she had only ever been a civilian nurse because correcting them required telling more truth than she could survive. Yet Major Reed had saluted her, not randomly, not involuntarily. He had recognized something or someone. At 7:40 p.m., Dr. Harlan entered with Captain Stowe. "No visitors after hours," Mara said. Harlan ignored her. "How is our distressed patient?" "Calmer now, without his decorations, without the public humiliation." Captain Stowe looked down. Harlan's smile became thin. "You have developed a troubling habit of dramatizing administrative procedure. You have developed a troubling habit of calling cruelty procedure." The words escaped before Mara could stop them. The room went still. Captain Stowe stared at her. Alan stepped closer. "Do you know why nurses like you struggle in institutions like this?" Mara said nothing. "Because you confuse proximity with authority. You stand beside the bed long enough and begin to believe you command the room." Major Reed's eyes moved from Harlan to Mara. Harlan continued, "But compassion is not command. Sentiment is not evidence. And whatever performance occurred this morning does not change the fact that those medals are under investigation." Mara kept her voice even. "Then investigate them." "We are." "No," she said. "You removed them in front of staff and soldiers before verification. That wasn't investigation. That was theater." For the first time, Captain Stowe spoke. "Doctor, the nurse might have a point about the lining." Harlan turned slowly. "Captain, I saw stitching. You saw frayed fabric with letters, which might be exactly why the case requires secure review." Mara looked at Stowe. "Where is it?" He did not answer. Major Reed made a sound, not a word. A strained breath pulled through years of silence. Everyone turned. His hand rose again, not to salute this time, but to point toward Captain Stowe, then toward Mara, then to his own chest, a triangle of accusation, plea, and memory. Harlan's face flushed. Enough. Nurse Linton, step out. No, the word surprised even Mara. Harlan blinked. Excuse me. He is my patient, and I am the attending physician. Then act like one. Captain Stowe inhaled sharply. Harlan's voice dropped. You are suspended from direct care, pending review. Mara felt the floor vanish beneath her. Major Reed's hand clenched. You can't remove me from his room because I asked where his property is. I can remove you because your behavior is destabilizing a vulnerable patient. Mara looked at Major Reed. His eyes were wet now, not confused, not vacant, furious, but trapped. That was the part that broke her. She knew what it was to have truth trapped inside you, while men with cleaner uniforms wrote the official version. Paige appeared in the doorway, breathless. Mara, she said. Harlan turned. Nurse Kim, not now. Paige held up a transfer slip. Her hand shook, but her voice did not. The metal case was not logged into evidence. It was signed out to Dr. Harlan's office. Captain Stowe's head snapped toward Harlan. Harlan's smile disappeared. Mara looked at the transfer slip, then at Major Reed. The old soldier's eyes closed once, slowly, as if he had known. As if this was not the first time someone had taken proof and called it procedure. Dr. Harlan tried to take the transfer slip from Paige. She stepped back. It was the smallest act of defiance Mara had ever seen, and one of the bravest. Paige Kim was not dramatic. She apologized to coffee machines when they jammed. She carried extra socks in her locker for patients whose families forgot. She hated conflict so much she once cried after correcting a resident's medication order, even though her correction had prevented a dangerous mistake. But now she held the paper against her chest and said, "No." Harlan stared at her. Nurse Kim, you can request a copy through records. Captain Stowe looked from Paige to Harlan. Doctor, why was the case sent to your office? For secure review. Evidence is secured through command chain. This is a hospital matter. The decorations are military property, under review, and the patient is under my care. Mara heard the shift. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Captain Stowe no longer sounded like a man repeating orders. He sounded like a man discovering that he had been used to perform a humiliation he did not fully understand. Harlan sensed it too. Captain, he said smoother now, do not let a pair of nurses turn a simple integrity check into an emotional circus. Mara flinched. She hated that she did. Harlan noticed, and satisfaction flickered across his face. Major Reed made another strange sound from the bed. Mara went to him, despite the suspension threat. She leaned close. I'm here. Harlan snapped. You are not authorized. Captain Stowe interrupted. Let her assess him. Harlan turned on him. You are outside your lane, Captain. So are you, Stowe said. Silence filled the room. For a moment, Mara saw not the polished officer from the morning, but a young man carrying the weight of a uniform he had not yet grown into. He looked frightened by his own words, but he did not withdraw them. Doctor, Harlan buttoned his coat slowly. This will be documented. Good, Mara said quietly. Harlan looked at her with cold promise. Yes, it will. He left. Only after his footsteps faded did Paige exhale. Captain Stowe remained near the foot of the bed. Nurse Linton, he said, what is your connection to Morrow Ridge? Mara's hand stilled on Major Reed's blanket. Paige looked at her. There it was. The question she had outrun through night shifts, new badges, civilian shoes, and years of careful silence. Mara could lie. She had lied by omission so long. It felt almost like privacy. She could say she had seen the name in the chart. She could say all nurses learned field signals. She could say anything that kept the old door shut. Major Reed watched her, not demanding, waiting. That was worse. Mara swallowed. I was there. Paige's lips parted. 80. Evacuation. Yes, in what capacity? Field medic attachment. His eyes dropped to her badge. You were military. I was. What was your call sign? Mara looked at Major Reed. His fingers moved once. Tap. Tell. She closed her eyes. Quiet medic 17. Page whispered. QM 17. Captain Stowe stepped back as if the letters had become physical. Mara turned toward the window. Night had turned the glass into a dark mirror. She could see herself there in blue scrubs, hair pinned back, face older than she felt. No uniform, no rank, no proof. I gave warnings at Morrow Ridge, she said. Weather, route, radio interference. I kept saying the marked road was wrong. Command said hold formation. Then everything broke apart. I spent the next hours moving between vehicles, calling coordinates, trying to keep people alive until evacuation reached us. Her voice thinned. Paige moved closer, but did not touch her. Mara continued. Afterward, the report said communications were unclear. It said I acted outside protocol. It said casualties were increased by confusion in the field. Stowe frowned. That's not the version I heard. Mara looked at him. What version did you hear? My father was attached to the investigation office. He used to say Morrow Ridge was the reason records should never be sealed before survivors could speak. He hesitated. He died 2 years ago, but he kept copies of things, notes, names. Did he know Major Reed? I don't know. Stowe looked at Elias. I requested this review because discrepancies came up during award ceremony planning. Harlan told me Reed might be displaying decorations that belonged to men lost at Morrow Ridge. Mara's face tightened. He said Reed stole from the dead, in careful language. Careful cruelty is still cruelty. Stowe accepted the blow without defense. Major Reed's hand moved again, drawing the rectangle on the blanket. The case, Paige said. Stowe nodded. We need to retrieve it. But that was not simple. Dr. Holland was the hospital's senior attending over the veteran ward. He had donors arriving the next morning for the annual remembrance dedication. Colonel Adrian Shepard from Regional Command would be present. The ward was being considered for a major funding renewal. Harlan had built his reputation on turning trauma care into ceremony, polished speeches, dramatic patient stories, carefully selected heroes. Mara had always avoided those ceremonies because they turned pain into a stage. Now Harlan had found a new stage, and he had chosen Major Reed's medals as the prop. Paige checked the hallway. His office is locked by now. Stowe said command access can open it. Mara looked at him. You'd do that? I helped remove those medals, he said. If I was wrong, I need to know before tomorrow. From the bed came a faint whisper. Not a word yet, but close. Myra leaned in. Major Reed's lips trembled. His eyes were fixed on Stowe. Not. The room stopped breathing. He fought for the rest. Not his. Stowe's face drained. Myra touched the blanket. The medals. Major Reed's eyes shifted to her, then back toward the door where Harlan had gone. Not his. Story. Captain Stowe did not break into Dr. Harlan's office. He did something more dangerous. He followed procedure. Within 30 minutes, he returned with Colonel Adrian Shepard, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with tired eyes, and a calm that did not need to announce itself. Shepard wore his dress uniform without decoration beyond what regulations required. He walked into the ward as if he had been in too many rooms where people mistook volume for command. Dr. Harlan came with him, smiling too hard. This is unnecessary, Harlan said. Colonel, I apologize that a minor internal matter has been exaggerated. Shepard did not look at him. He looked at Major Reed, then at Mara, then at the empty shelf beside the bed. Until medals were removed from this room in front of witnesses, Shepard said. Harlan folded his hands. Pending verification, I'm told the case was then diverted to your office for safekeeping. Bring it. Harlan's expression tightened. Colonel, with respect, medical property. Bring it. The order was quiet. No one misunderstood it. Harlan left. The ward seemed to lean after him. Paige stood beside Mara's shoulder, nearly touching hers. Captain Stowe remained near the foot of Major Reed's bed. He looked shaken, not by anger now, but by the possibility that his own obedience had injured someone innocent. Major Reed watched the door. When Harlan returned, he carried the black metal case like it had become heavier. He placed it on the rolling table. Shepard nodded to Stowe. Open it. Stowe did. The empty velvet looked even starker under the examination light. The medals were gone, sealed separately somewhere else. Only their impressions remained, pale ghosts of honor. Mara's eyes went straight to the lifted seam. There, she said. Harlan laughed once. A loose stitch. Shepard glanced at him. Doctor, you will stop narrating. The colonel took a pair of gloves from the wall dispenser and handed them to Mara. She stared at them. To me? She asked. You noticed it, Shepard said. Show us. Harlan's jaw tightened. Mara put on the gloves. Her fingers felt clumsy. Everyone watched. The whole ward had gone still again. But this silence was different from the morning. Not contempt this time. Expectation. She lifted the edge of the velvet carefully. The fabric resisted. Paige held the light. Beneath the lining was a thin oilcloth packet, flattened by years inside the case. It had been stitched in place with dark thread. On the cloth, faded but readable, were the letters QM17. Mara could not breathe. Captain Stowe whispered, "Quiet, medic." Harlan stepped forward. "Shep packet should be opened by command personnel." Shepard's eyes stayed on Mara. "Continue." Mara cut the old thread with medical scissors and lifted the packet free. It was tied with a narrow strip of field tape, written on the tape in block letters. "If Reed cannot speak, give this to the quiet medic." Paige covered her mouth. Captain Stowe's face changed completely. The contempt in the room did not just vanish. It reversed direction, searching for the person who had fed it. Harlan said, "Anyone could have written that." Mara's hands trembled. "Shepard notice?" "Nurse Linton, would you prefer I open it?" Mara wanted to say yes. She wanted to step back into the safe role. Nurse, charting, medication, bedside care. No pass, no mountain, no report, no dead radio. But Major Reed looked at her. His eyes held the same plea from the morning. Not for himself, for the truth. Mara untied the tape. Inside were 3 items. A folded field card, cracked along its creases. A small photograph sealed in plastic. And a metal ribbon bar with 1 empty pin backing. She unfolded the card. The handwriting was cramped, military, written by someone using limited light and no time. "To whoever receives this, Major Elias Reed is custodian, not claimant. Medals and clothes belong to the men extracted from Morrow Ridge and to the medic who refused to leave them. If Reed survives and I do not, ensure the quiet medic receives his record of action." Official channel, compromised. "Do not let Harlan write the only report." Mara stopped reading. The room seemed to tilt. Shepard's eyes sharpened at the name. "Harlan," Captain Stowe said. Dr. Harlan's face had gone pale beneath his practiced composure. "This is absurd." Mara looked up slowly. "You were on the review board. You was a trauma consultant. You signed the report that said my warnings were unclear." "I signed a report based on available evidence." Major Reed made a sound. All eyes turned to him. His hand pushed against the mattress. Paige moved instinctively to support him, but he shook his head once. Not violently, not dangerously, just enough to say he needed to do this himself. Mara whispered, "Major, you don't have to." He looked at her. Then, he forced himself upright. The movement cost him. His shoulders shook. Stowe stepped forward, but Shepard raised a hand to let the old soldier choose. Major Reed's eyes locked on Harlan. For 6 years, he had lived in silence. Now he broke it one word at a time. "Share, warn them." Mara's eyes filled. Harlan's mouth opened, but no sound came. Major Reed swallowed painfully. "Shh, bah." The ward was no longer watching a confused patient. They were watching a witness return from the place where truth had been buried. Mara looked down at the photograph with blurred vision. It showed a field tent lit by harsh portable lamps. Several exhausted soldiers sat beneath thermal blankets. At the center, younger Mara Linton knelt beside a stretcher, one hand raised, giving the old signal. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Alive. Behind her stood Major Elias Reed, younger and grim, holding the same black metal case under one arm. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "Quiet medic got them out. Reed will carry proof." Captain Stowe turned away, struggling with his face. Shepard took the field card gently from Mara's hand. His voice was quiet but carried through the room. "Dr. Harlan," he said, "you will not leave this ward." Harlan stiffened. "Colonel, you will stand there," Shepard said, "while we finish reading what you tried to keep closed by morning." The remembrance dedication had become something no administrator could control. The chairs had already been arranged in the main veteran ward hall. A podium stood beneath the flag. Staff gathered in pressed uniforms and clean scrubs. Recovering soldiers sat in wheelchairs or leaned on canes along the walls. Visitors from the base command office arrived expecting a polished speech from Dr. Harlan about integrity, healing, and honor. Instead, they found Colonel Shepard standing at the podium with the black metal case in front of him. Dr. Harlan stood to the side, not seated with leadership, not moving freely through the room, standing. Captain Stowe remained behind Major Reed's wheelchair. Paige stood with Mara near the nurse's station. Mara had tried to stay in room 12. She had tried to say this was not about her, but Shepard had looked at her and said, "It became about you the moment they mocked you for telling the truth." So she stood there. Her hair was pinned. Her scrubs were plain. Her badge hung slightly crooked because her hands had been unsteady when she clipped it on. She felt exposed without armor. Harlan's eyes found her across the room. There was no smirk now, only calculation. Shepard began without ceremony. "Yesterday, decorations belonging to Major Elias Reed were removed from his room during a public review. That act was witnessed by staff, patients, and officers. The stated reason was concern over authenticity." The hall remained silent. Afterward, evidence hidden inside the metal case revealed that the stated concern was incomplete. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Shepard opened the case. The medals had been returned to the velvet, but not exactly as before. Each now rested beside a small label, "Custodian, Witness, Posthumous, Pending Recognition." Mara saw the empty oval again. Still empty. Shepard lifted the field card. This document was written by Lieutenant Samuel Arlen, deceased during the Morrow Ridge evacuation 6 years ago. Its chain of custody was maintained by Major Elias Reed, who became medically unable to provide verbal testimony after the event. Harlan stared at the floor. Shepard continued, "The card states that Major Reed was not falsely claiming honors. He was protecting evidence." Captain Stowe looked down at Major Reed. The old veteran sat upright in his wheelchair, dressed in a hospital robe beneath a neatly folded blanket. He looked fragile and immovable at the same time. Shepard read carefully, avoiding the most painful details, but leaving the truth intact. Morrow Ridge had been issued by a field medic under call sign Quiet Medic 17. Those warnings had not been properly recorded. Survivors had credited that medic with returning repeatedly through dangerous conditions to stabilize and evacuate the injured. Major Reed had gathered decorations, letters, and witness notes from men who feared the official report would erase what happened. Then Shepard paused, his eyes lifted. The medic identified in these materials is Sergeant Mara Linton. Every head turned. Mara felt the old instinct to disappear. Paige reached for her hand and held it. Shepard went on, "Now Nurse Mara Linton of this ward." The word nurse sounded different in his mouth. Not smaller than soldier. Not less than witness. Not just. Mara looked at the floor because if she looked at the room, she would break. Harlan spoke suddenly. "Colonel, this is an emotional reconstruction based on battlefield confusion and unofficial material. Separate turn. You will have a formal opportunity to respond." "You, Ram," responding now. "You are interrupting now." A low sound moved through the hall. Not laughter. Recognition. Harlan flushed. This hospital cannot allow unverified documents to destroy professional reputation. Mara looked up. There it was again. Reputation. Not truth. Not patience. Not the major whose medals had been removed while he watched. Not the nurse humiliated for seeing what others ignored. Reputation. Major Reed's hand moved on the wheelchair arm. Captain Stowe leaned down. "Major." Reed pushed against the chair. Mara immediately stepped forward. He shouldn't stand, but Reed turned his eyes to her. "Please." The same look. Mara stopped. Captain Stowe and Paige supported him carefully, one on each side. No drama. No sudden motion. No danger. Just a slow, painful rise by a man who had been silent too long. The hall watched him stand. Major Reed faced the room. His voice came rough and quiet, but the silence carried it. "My medals." No one moved. His gaze shifted to Harlan, but not "my memory." Harlan looked away. Reed breathed carefully. She was the last voice on the radio. Mara covered her mouth. She said, "Hold the light." A sound escaped from somewhere in the crowd. A veteran in the second row bowed his head. Reed's voice strengthened by one thin thread. "I held it." He turned toward Mara. She came. Mara shook her head, tears slipping now despite every defense she had built. "Major." He lifted his hand. The salute began slowly, painfully, with the same tremor as the day before. But this time, no one mistook it for confusion. He saluted her in front of the entire ward. The nurse they mocked, the medic they erased, the woman who had kept showing up even after the record abandoned her. Captain Stowe straightened. Then, with tears standing in his eyes, he saluted too. Colonel Shepard followed. One by one, uniformed visitors in the hall raised their hands. Older veterans, young soldiers, a corpsman at the doorway, even a security officer who had only come to manage the crowd. Paige did not salute. She was not military. Instead, she stood beside Mara and held her hand tighter. Mara could barely see. For years, she had thought forgiveness would come from someone telling her she had done enough. But as the room stood in silence, she realized the thing she needed was not praise, it was correction. The record of her life had been bent by men who preferred clean reports to complicated courage. Now, in the cold hospital ward, the record bent back. Shepard lowered his salute first and reached into the metal case. From the empty oval in the velvet, he lifted a small ribbon and medal that had been wrapped separately in tissue beneath the packet. "This," he said, "was never missing." Mara stared. Shepard looked at her. It was waiting. Mara did not step forward at first. Her body refused. The hall watched, not with pressure now, but with a tenderness that was almost harder to bear. She had spent years surviving disbelief. Belief felt unfamiliar. Too close. Colonel Shepard held the medal in his gloved hand. I cannot conduct a full military awards ceremony in a hospital ward without formal review, he said. But I can state what the recovered record shows. This decoration was recommended, intercepted, and never delivered. Its status will be reviewed immediately. Dr. Harlan made a small movement. Shepard did not even look at him. And the circumstances of that interception will also be reviewed. Harlan went still. Mara looked at the medal, then at Major Reed. He was seated again now, tired from standing, but his eyes were clear. The act had cost him, but it had also returned something. Not his youth, not the lost years, but his place in his own story. Mara walked toward him instead of toward Shepard. She knelt beside the wheelchair. You carried that all this time, she whispered. Major Reed's mouth moved slowly. Promise. The word broke her, not because it was dramatic, because it was simple. A promise had survived where reports failed, where careers maneuvered, where memory was trapped in a damaged body. A black case on a hospital shelf had held more truth than an entire boardroom of official signatures. Mara placed her hand over his. I'm sorry, she said, his brow furrowed. I left, she whispered. After the review, after they said my warnings were unclear, I stopped fighting it. Major Reed's fingers pressed hers. No, just that. No, not absolution from guilt exactly, something stronger. Refusal to let her carry blame that did not belong to her. Captain Stowe stepped forward next. He looked younger than he had the day before. Nurse Linton, he said, voice tight, I owe you an apology. And Major Reed, I followed an order because it came with the right language. I didn't ask who would be harmed by it. Mara stood. You stopped, she said. Too late, but you stopped. Stowe looked at Major Reed. Sir, your medals will be restored to your room under command protection. Reed's eyes moved to the case, then to Mara. Mara understood. Not just his room, she said. She turned to Shepard. With respect, Colonel, that case should not disappear into evidence again. Shepard studied her. What do you propose? Mara looked around the ward. At the patients who had watched, at the staff who had stayed silent too long, and those who had found courage late but not too late. At least until the formal review is complete, she said. Let it stay here, in a visible place, with a note that says it is under investigation because truth matters. Not hidden, not used for speeches, just present. Page smiled through tears. A veteran near the wall said, Amen. Shepard nodded once. Approved, Harlan finally spoke, his voice thin. Colonel, this public handling of sensitive materials is highly irregular. Shepard turned to him. So was removing a silent veteran's medals to humiliate him before verification. Harlan's face tightened. Shepard continued. So was dismissing a nurse's observation. Because you mistook her humility for ignorance. The room absorbed the words. Mara did too. Harlan looked at her then. And for one strange second she saw the fear beneath his contempt. He had not hated her because she was weak. He had hated the possibility that she was proof that his report had been incomplete, proof that his authority had once chosen convenience over truth, proof that a nurse he mocked had carried a history he could not control. Security did not drag him away. There was no shouting, no spectacle. Shepard simply ordered him relieved from ward duties, pending inquiry. And perhaps that quietness was the deepest justice. Harlan walked out under the eyes of every person he had tried to impress. No applause followed, only silence, the kind he had forced on others. Over the next week, Room 12 changed. The metal case returned to Major Reed's shelf, but now the shelf had a small sign written by Page and approved by Command. This case is preserved as evidence of service, witness, and delayed truth. Patients stopped calling Elias the silent major. They called him Major Reed. Some came by his room just to sit with him, not to demand stories, not to make him perform memory, just to be near a man who had guarded truth without words. Captain Stowe visited daily, at first for official inventory, then with old papers from his father's files. His father had indeed kept notes, including names of survivors who had credited Quiet Medic 17. The formal review widened. More documents surfaced, not all at once, not cleanly, but enough. Truth rarely arrived like thunder. Sometimes it came like footsteps down a hospital corridor. Mara kept working. At first, everyone treated her differently, in a way that made her uncomfortable. Residents stood straighter. Administrators used her full name. Nurses who had once gossiped now softened their voices. A few people apologized. She learned to accept both. One afternoon, she found Page staring at the metal case. "What?" Mara asked. Page wiped her eyes quickly. "Nothing. That is never true with you." Page laughed softly. "I keep thinking about how you told them to check the lining. That was all. Just one sentence." And they laughed. Mara looked at the case. Sometimes one sentence is all truth gets at first. And if nobody listens, Mara thought of Reed's salute, the field card, the old signal, the promise. Then someone has to keep it safe until they can. On the final day of the internal ward review, Colonel Shepard returned with a small group from Command. No donors, no cameras, no polished speech. Just witnesses. Major Reed sat beside the metal case. Mara stood opposite him, wearing scrubs because she refused to turn the moment into a costume. Page stood behind her. Captain Stowe held the corrected inventory. Shepard announced that Major Reed's decorations were verified. His role as custodian of the Morrow Ridge evidence was formally acknowledged. The allegation of false display was withdrawn. Then Schiffer turned to Mara. "The review of Sergeant Mara Linton's commendation remains ongoing," he said, "but the recovered witness record has been accepted into evidence. Until the final award determination is made, Command recognizes her as a verified witness and credited life-saving medic of Morrow Ridge." Mara closed her eyes. Not a full ending, but an official beginning. Major Reed lifted his hand. This time Mara was ready. She did not shrink from it. He saluted her, and after a breath she returned it, not as a nurse pretending to be a soldier again, not as a woman trapped in old grief, but as the quiet medic who had never truly stopped serving. Around them, the ward stood silent. Doctors, nurses, soldiers, patients, people who had seen humiliation become testimony, and testimony become justice. The metal case remained open between them. The empty oval no longer looked like a wound. It looked like a place waiting for truth to come home. Some heroes returned from war to applause. Others returned to silence, to hospital rooms, to records that forget their names. But truth has a memory of its own. In Fort Astor's Cole Veteran Ward, a silent major kept his promise. A mock nurse found her name again, and a metal case became louder than every lie. If this story moved you, share your country below, and subscribe to The Quiet Medic for more hidden heroes.